So thank you everybody for those who are joining in live and obviously those that are watching afterwards on YouTube. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Bradford Cloud User Group. This is our first session in 2022. Where the last time we were here was the festive calendar where we did the quiz. So this is our first of the 2022. We've got big plans this year. We're going to try and keep on doing the monthly events. We've been in discussion with a number of people. We're also hopefully looking towards maybe March again, doing a Women in Tech month like we did last year. That was very successful, and everyone enjoyed that. And we'll see how things go. We're still discussing an in-person event at some point, maybe a Bradford Cloud User Group on tour. So we'll see as time goes on how that goes. But for now, I think we're just going to stay virtual. So yeah, today's session is a special one. We have JP Monteiro, is that right?
Yep, that's perfect.
Excellent. I'll let JP do his own proper introduction, but his session is going to be around data democratization, the curiosity tax, and why we should focus less on dashboards and more on language. So I will hand over to JP and do an introduction to himself, his company, and let him start on the talk. So over to you, JP. I'll unshare my screen and I'll let you.
Thank you.
Just a bit of housekeeping. If everyone can go on mute. Any questions, please do put in the chat, and we'll obviously aim them towards JP when we get a sec.
Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction. So yeah, my name is JP. Today I'll be talking a bit about data democratization. So can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it. Perfect.
Screen, yeah.
Good. So I'm one of the co-founders of Veezoo. So my name is actually João Pedro. I'm originally from Brazil. Around 10 years ago, I came to Switzerland to study computer science. My passion has always been around data and natural language processing. So that's my area of specialization. And around 5 years ago, we decided to found Veezoo, which is a data analytics company, and with a mission to make access to information as easy as just asking for it. So we're really this intersection between data and AI there with natural language at our core. And so today I'm going to be talking a bit about data democratization and what I like to call the 3 stages of data maturity. So throughout the path from a data for a company that is going through that wants to become more data driven, we usually see these 3 stages here roughly, right? One that I like to call data anarchy, second step the data aristocracy, and finally data democracy being the utopic data driven final stage, right, of a company. So let's start with the data anarchy. All right, so this is probably well known to a lot of people. It's a very common stage. So with respect to the data, we talk about silos. The data is spread across different systems. And then regarding tools, the main tool that everyone likes to use, but it's a bit overused in this stage, is the Excel. Everything is a spreadsheet. Often these are offline, and you end up having different versions, right? So it's a really complete mess. And from an organizational perspective, things are very departmental, right? So you have different departments reporting different numbers for the same metrics. They cannot agree on the definitions. So really, you need to bring order to this chaos. And usually there is like one new person that joins the company and says, "Oh, let's change everything. Let's do some digital transformation, and then let's move to this data aristocracy stage." And one of the first things that is done is like, okay, well, now instead of working with silos, let's centralize this data. Let's have a data warehouse, gather data from different sources, structure it, store it in one central database. you set up ELT pipelines and things like that. And then from the tool perspective, what gets introduced are dashboards, right? So instead of talking about, people continue using Excel because, who doesn't love Excel? But dashboards become really the source of truth, right? But it turns out that everything becomes a dashboard. So you end up with many dashboards. And finally, from an organizational perspective, you end up centralizing access to data. You have a team. Usually at this stage, you call it a reporting team, right? Or any kind of question that comes in, ask the reporting team. They will provide you with the answers. And they are the team that is responsible for that, right? So that's the aristocracy, and turns out reality things are not exactly like this, right? So it usually turns into a data bureaucracy, right? So the data warehouse, yes, one central database, but based on a lot of upfront requirements in a big waterfall project that takes a year or more to get done. It's a very long, usually, projects there to do this data warehouse. So that's usually the reality there. The dashboard, yes, everything is a dashboard, even if it will only be used once and end up rotting, right? So these trash boards are just these dashboards that people prepare it, and you see it once, maybe for 2 weeks or so, and then I don't care about it anymore. And next time I ask for it, maybe I'll want something else. This team, this reporting team, this centralized team, quickly becomes a bottleneck and leads to a data breadline, and creates this, what I like to call, curiosity tax. So what is this curiosity tax? Curiosity tax is basically, a form of taxation that appears inside a company unwillingly, right? That's not the idea, but it ends up happening, right? So let's say we have these business users. Curious George is very curious. He has a lot of questions. He's very motivated. So starting, he's just new in the company, has a lot of questions. So yes, so let's answer a couple of questions. So we'll go around and look for some predefined dashboard that magically answers the question. Great. So Curious George is very happy, but a lot of times that's not really what happens, right? Maybe there is no predefined dashboard that magically answers the kind of question that George has. And in this case, the next step would be, we have another tool here which allows you to find some information, put some stuff together if you are technically capable. Some self-service tool that you can kind of put things together and get an answer to your question. And you probably don't want to do this all the time again, so you end up saving it into another dashboard, right? Next time you don't need to go over this whole process. You already saved it into another dashboard. Well, that's only the case if George has some technical skills and has the patience to do that. If things get a bit more complicated, or maybe the self-service is a bit limited, you can always ask the data team over Slack or over email. So now George is kind of curious. He's not that curious anymore. So he talks to the data team. The data team is very willing to help him. And there's a back and forth. You ask a question and it needs a clarification. Let's go back. Oh, I get like a first answer. It's not really what I want. Can you check this? Oh, maybe that follow up to this question, and everything gets prepared into another dashboard. So that's the end product. Well, after a couple of times, and if you have like a lot of people starting to ask questions, the immune response from the data team usually is to, let's actually add a form here in between, so that if you actually have a data request or there's some question, please first answer these couple of questions. Which department is it? Quickly summarize. What do you expect? Is it really important? Did you already check other dashboards? And what are you going to do with this information? And I mean, these are all very valid questions, especially if you have limited resources. But now George is even less curious, so is okay. Now I need to do even more work. So I think I'm just gonna go with my gut instinct on that one. But if it's really important, then you can go over the whole process and you will get another dashboard. In the end, at each of these scenarios, the end result is always a new dashboard, a new report. And even then, for these questions where there is a finalized dashboard or report, George cannot even find it anymore, right? So it will be lost in this jungle of reports, and every new employee that comes in will have to learn where to find this information, and a lot of time is spent showing directions there or how to use these tools to find information. So what happens in the end is that curiosity is in fact taxed inside this company, right? So it's not something that is very there's not a culture that encourages curiosity because, well, information has a lot of effort, a lot of cost to get into. So that's the situation where we end up when the data aristocracy is data bureaucracy. And so what would be the ideal scenario, right? So instead of this long process for data warehouse, you should focus on minimum viable data products, and it can take a lean approach to it. So, take a small part of the data that creates value, has specific use cases, and evolve from there based on users' needs, and not on too many upfront requirements, right? You have to do it a lean way. The tools you will need a self-service tool. You will need intuitive. These interfaces need to be very intuitive, enable users to find information they need when they need it most, and that's a really challenging part because self-service can be very complicated and can lead to a lot of empty patterns. And finally, you will still want a data team, right? So the reporting team is now this data team, but it's works in a decentralized way, but with governance. So you focus the resources of your data team on actually curating data instead of providing one-off reports. Yes, so there's always a lot of resistance to data democracy, and one common one is what about data quality? Our data is not ready. We first need to clean the CRM data before we can start doing anything. So that's where really the minimum viable data product comes in. From a cultural perspective, you have to, as you're part of the data team, stop complaining about data quality. Let's, make data useful. Let's find ways to show value to the business users, even if it's for a small case, and start from there. Data doesn't need to be 100% clean for you to create value, right? So, and often if you make data useful, you will create the incentives for people to take more care about the quality of data, right? If you can make somehow the CRM data a bit more useful for sales teams, they will notice that they should be actually filling some things out a bit better, because then they could make good use of it. And the second point, very common one, is data literacy, right? Oh, users don't know the data. They don't know how to interpret the results. Well, for that, yes, of course. I mean, the users don't know the data. They need first access. You need ease of access. That this incentive, and you should, as a culture, you should incentivize the curiosity, and training should be on asking questions and interpreting results. If you can avoid, by choosing intuitive tools that are that don't require like a lot of very expert training to do simple things, you can focus more on the actual data literacy part, because people, they tend to confuse data literacy with actually being able to use a specific tool, and it's not about that. It's about knowing how to ask questions, knowing how to interpret results, These are the most important things if you're talking about data literacy, and not really about how to create a dashboard in Tableau or something like that. So yeah, and we're all in this situation because, you know, I like to joke that we've been lied to, like big data companies. So here are some hard to swallow truths. We were told we were going to be data artists. There's been a lot of focus on, you know, building beautiful dashboards and, you know, what are the tools that I need to become really a data artist. But in fact, you know, we shouldn't be thinking about being really data artists, right? That's not really the point of our job, right? In fact, you know, of course, you should create great visualizations that make sense, and this is definitely one that doesn't. But you know, in general, that's not the kind of approach that you should think. And also, we were told it was all about building dashboards, and you know, you can find hundreds and hundreds of courses online on how to build dashboards. And sure, it's an important kind of skill set, but then again, you know, it shouldn't be the focus of your job, because if this is the focus, then what happens is exactly this proliferation of dashboards, right? Where in the end you should be actually answering questions and helping people answer questions by themselves. And yeah, so it's not really about building dashboards. I use the term here trashboards from Seth Rosen. So exactly, so this dashboard which is viewed only once but never used again. And finally, sometimes we may think, you know, if you're in the data team, that our job is about translating, you know, just being an English to SQL translator, but that's also not really what data democratization is all about. So in my opinion, data democratization is about bridging the gap between our language, the business language, and the language of data, right? The closer you make, you know, business concepts, the terms that people use closer to what there is in the data, and people, and there's not this huge gap, right, between the questions that are asked and the data that is used. The more intuitive you can make data, and the more accessible it becomes. What this means concretely to bridge this language gap, right? It's about having a firm grasp on which questions are being asked inside a company, right? So what are people actually asking about? Which information are they looking for, right? It's about enabling the organization to answer questions at scale. It's about enabling people to interpret the answers. So that's where data literacy comes in, asking questions and being able to understand what the answer is about. It's about unveiling and promoting a shared language with consistent definitions, right? So only by agreeing on terms and having them clearly defined in the data, company-wide, you know, can you actually democratize access to data. And finally, it's about creating a culture that encourages people to ask more and better questions. So in the end, it's all about, you know, questions and answers, and making good use of them. And it was with this philosophy that we started Veezoo. We wanted to turn these ideas into code, into a product that would help people go through this journey in becoming more data driven. And back then, we started with this simple question, right? What if you could just ask? So what if every information that you could want from the data would be as easily accessible as just asking for it, right? So it's the long-term vision of, making it really easy as just asking a question, getting information from data. So now I'd like to quickly, give you a live demo about Veezoo so you can see a bit for yourself what I actually mean with all these things that I just mentioned. So let me start by creating an account. You can create a free account in Veezoo.com. So we have a couple of demos here you can try out. I really like the UFO demo. And you can connect to your database, or you can upload an Excel file. So I'm just going to upload one that I have here, Hyperstore. Good. So let me show you. I mean, Hyperstore is just for you that, for all of you that already are familiar with some Tableau data, is very similar to Tableau. The demo that they have orders, you have products, customers, and you company selling products online. So we'll gonna import everything. Let's see what happens. Okay, so as you can see here, that's where I type the questions in. I have already a couple of suggestions, and you see there's this chat interface. So that's, you can see all the answers and some kind of history. There's some tutorials that I can do, and here is already the table that I just imported. And if I actually want to see the rest of the data, I can go to knowledge graph, and I can see it in the sidebar: customers, orders, product, and visually. That's how they look like. Now remember, it was an Excel sheet, so we put 3 worksheets, and Veezoo was able to recognize here the foreign keys, even though they were not specified. You know, how is product related to order and how is order related to customer. And as a first step, it already tries to understand what your data is about. So you can see there's some geographical information here. There's this person here. There's dates. There's some money involved. So, yes, so 1 second. So let's ask a couple of questions. So start with something like, so we see we have sales. So let's yeah, sales, or you can also write revenue. It's same. Visual understands them as being synonyms. How much revenue did we make with consumers? So consumers segment in some state, so maybe in New York last year. So just like that, you know, I get an answer. So total sales, order of state New York, consumer segment in last year, 2021, right? So that's how much we made. And it doesn't only show me the answer; it also shows me what it believes is an important information for you. It's probably what you're interested in. Also seeing it per month, right? That's it, right? That's how Veezoo works. You know, you ask your question, you get the answer, and then you can ask a next question. So let's see. We could, for instance, take a look at it by category, and in fact, inside my company, we don't just call it category. I mean, that's the appropriate term. A lot of people just call it product group, but our preferred term is really category, right? So I can just add it as a synonym here. And now if I say, so let's follow up on this one. Let's say by product group. You see, I get suggestions for category, but I can also ask just for product group, which is the same. And I get now a multi-line chart. You can change it. There are different visualizations. Veezoo tries to choose the most appropriate one. So you don't need to really be focusing a lot on, you know, building visualizations, choosing, but actually focus on asking questions and getting the answers. So, for instance, this one, stacked area chart, it's a nice one. But you can ask also more complicated things, like, so let's say, show me all customers from New York with no order in the last 12 months. And let's say, so we have birth date, so we can ask about birthday. We already get some suggestions with birthday next week. So it's a complicated question. Usually that's something you would then ask someone in the reporting department to actually answer this. But Veezoo understands it as custom without order between February and January this year. The birthday of the customer is next week, and the customer made orders to New York, right? And what we notice here, for instance, is that actually, if you look at the data, customer, for instance, there was only a birth date, like a fully qualified date. So, but Veezoo is able to understand here that this case next week, I'm only caring really about the month and the day. I'm not asking about people that were born next week. So without any additional configuration or any additional work, I was able to ask that. And so now, for instance, let's say if you ask something that is not in the data, for instance, we don't have anything about gender. So let's say, show me all orders from female customers. The first thing that happens is, I get like a notification here. Female is an unknown word. Let's say I just still want to ask about that. So Veezoo tells me, I don't know what you mean with female. I will ignore this word and get you some kind of answer. Maybe it's a synonym that you are missing or lacking. But otherwise, you can always give feedback. In this case, it's not correct. So I'm just going to give feedback. I can write a message here, or I can choose from one of them. Like, Veezoo misunderstood the question, not happy with the visualization, think the data is wrong. Sometimes, that can happen. And yeah, some other options there about follow-up. So yeah, so I could say, for instance, gender would be really important. And now, if you're part of the data team, you will have access to this feedback, right? So in this way, we are bringing together these two worlds there. One of from the business users accessing the data, and the data team that is responsible for curating data. So in this case, you can see that people have been asking about gender. I'll show you afterwards what we have as analytics for that, and you can extend the data, right, in a lean way, right, based on usage, based on users' needs. Okay, so now, we're talking a lot about asking questions, but what about, if you have like maybe there are some questions like your KPIs, your most important KPIs that you don't want really just to be always asking, right? You would like to actually have them saved, like in the dashboard, right? Dashboards still make sense. We just should not overuse them. So what you can do is you can say, for instance, just do just a simple one. Let's take profit this month. Oops, add to my dashboard. Revenue this month. Maybe also number of orders this month. Revenue also this year. And finally, average revenue. Okay.
JP, we just have a quick question in the chat from Imran. Sure. Where is the uploaded data stored? Is it in the local country, or is it is it a data center somewhere else?
So our software runs in the cloud, in AWS cloud in Frankfurt. In this case here, where we have an Excel file. We're uploading it to one of our databases in Frankfurt. But in any other case, you will be accessing your live data connected to your SQL data, so we don't copy your data, right? So it's gonna be
okay.
Yeah.
So no data is stored in the cloud per se. It's just accessing your local file for that data.
Yeah, in this case, I uploaded my local file, right? And it's it's uploading it to a database. In this case, we actually use a Postgres database behind the scenes. So we create tables and put your data there. And it's only accessible to you, of course. But usually, Excel is just for demo purposes or some small analysis. You will usually be accessing your database. If you have to give access to some user, and I can show you afterwards a bit more.
So JP, do you know when a user logs off, is that file still there, or does it disappear? Does that data disappear?
It's still there. I mean, you have complete control over it. You can delete it if you want, but you can log off and come in again, and you can also share with other users within your organization, so they can all access the same file, for instance.
It's just that I'm asking because some countries, for example, there's a lot of companies in the UK that want their data to remain in the UK, not be stored in another country for legal compliance reasons. So is this data, if I was to log back in again and my data is still there, is that data being stored in AWS in Frankfurt, did you say? Is that the region that it's stored in?
Exactly. So, need to make sure that, that your data, that, you're following the right rules there. But, if you, for instance, want to connect, if you want to upload to your files, by yourself on your own database and give access to Veezoo, then, your data will remain there. Just for this feature, exactly that we currently store it within only Frankfurt.
Okay.
Yeah. So just continuing here, I created this small dashboard. It was really quick. I just asked a couple of questions, and I have it here. I can actually edit it if I want, make it bigger, change names, and so on. But I also want to show you something that I like. So even a dashboard is actually just a collection of questions and answers. So you can follow up on the dashboard and say, for instance, let's break it down by segment for New York. Right, so now all these widgets, they changed and applied the filter for New York, and you can see them by segment. And maybe I actually want to follow up further and compare with, I don't know, Ohio. Right, so now I can see here all of them. So profit this month compared to Ohio. So like this, you have, complete. You can also follow up on just one of the widgets if you want. But it's very flexible and easy to get, more information from your dashboard and filter it further. Right, and well, if you think this is also good to view, you can always save it as a dashboard. But again, our philosophy is really don't overuse dashboards. Only use it for things that you're going to actually look at every single day or every other week. Otherwise, just ask. So this is really from the business user side. That's what you can do with it. If you're part of the data team, we have a studio here. You can, there's a link to our Slack community we just created. There are some integrations with DBT Cloud if you're a DBT user. We have also new integration with Slack for you to get, a live feed over feedback that people give. So data team, they get directly notified. As for documentation, there's single sign-on, and most importantly, if you are a data team, you would actually want to configure Veezoo. And the way this happens, I mean, if you're familiar with Looker, Veezoo, it's kind of similar. It's based on code, right? So it's based in SQL, but we have this version-controlled code that allows you to define things, right? So you see here order. It's called order. You can give it a name in English. It's uniquely identified by this order ID. And you have things here like the date, which format is it, and for instance, you can define new attributes. Like, let's create a Boolean as an example. Let's define one like is bad, like if an order is a bad order. So what would be a bad order? First of all, let's give it a name. So this name is important because that's how you're going to ask for it, right? In the natural language interface. So name in English bad, and I'm going to give it a SQL expression here. There's just some, I can make reference. I'm referencing here another column that I already have, another attribute that I already have, like profit. Let's say that the profit, if it's below 0, it's a bad order. Okay? So now I can save it. And now if I come here and I write bad, you already see an autocomplete. There is like a Boolean connected to order, and I can ask, for instance, so what could we ask? Say percentage of bad orders category. So what does this mean? So 36% of the orders that we had in general, so there's no limit, there's no restriction there, were actually bad orders. Among office supplies, this was only 18.65%, and among technology, these are the categories that we have for products. These are the amount of bad orders. So it's that easy. And if you actually, maybe let's ask this simpler question just so you don't get overwhelmed by the SQL. How many bad orders per customer last month, maybe? So this is for each customer, and you can see the SQL query here. If you are, a data team person, and you will see this here is our definition of a bad order, right? So it's really writing SQL based on what you just added, right? So this is what Veezoo is generating behind the scenes whenever you ask a question, and that easy you can add new attributes. Okay, so what else can I show you? So the other side of the coin is the Metavisual. So what is Metavisual? So we still don't have anything here in the data because it takes a while, so it's not completely live. But as you can see, actually, you will have here for the data team a way to understand how your business users are asking or using Veezoo, right? So that's why it's Metavisual. You can see here users when they log in, which dashboards they have, how often they look at these dashboards, which questions they asked, if they left some kind of feedback, if there was anything that was not recognized in your question, right? So you can see, like, for instance, when we ask about female, you would see female popping up here, right? So you can then see what are the most frequent unrecognized concepts, and like this you will see, maybe a lot of people are asking about gender or about age, and you don't have age in the data, so you can add it, right? So it's a different level of transparency that you get, so that you can really, with data, prioritize requests, prioritize curation of data, and understand how people are using it. It's usually funny that BI solutions or data analytics solutions, they're not very welcoming with respect to understanding how people are using their tools, right? So it's not usually something that is built in, or at least is a very limited way, because it turns out a lot of these tools are not used that much. Right? So people log in, they check some dashboard once, but with Veezoo, you will really know how well people are using, where are they struggling, and so on. So yeah, unfortunately, I cannot ask anything yet about the questions that I just asked because it's not completely live. There's a 30 minutes delay, but that's the idea here, just to give you an overview of what is possible with Veezoo. So let me go back to my presentation, maybe show you a bit behind the scenes. Nope. This is the wrong one. So in summary, the idea behind Veezoo is so we can ask questions, get your answer, not jumping through a jungle of reports. Just ask, we want to promote shared language within your organization, where you can see clearly data definitions close to where the business user used the data. Actually, I just forgot to show you this. But sorry. So if you add, for instance, what a bad order is, so that means profit is below 0. It's actually made a loss with this order. Understandable. When you ask about bad orders, oops. Yep, that's a demo effect, I guess. Wasn't expecting that. Let's see if there's a small glitch. Okay, that's what it was supposed to show in the other one. So you can see the definitions right there where you have it, right? So where you don't need to jump around different tools and data definitions or like a data dictionary. You can keep it very close to your user. And if you're using, for instance, dbt to have all this information, Veezoo syncs with this, so you can take this information from somewhere else and point and make it accessible to your business user. Yes, and like this, you will promote a shared language within your organization with consistent definitions. And finally, full transparency over what business is asking for instead of clicks and filters. People are actually asking questions, so they're explaining to you what they're looking for. It's not just some random opening a dashboard and clicking around. It's very hard for you to understand what people are doing if you just have this data, but with questions, they're telling you exactly what they're looking for. So that's can really help you as part of the data team to extend data. Now let me give you. We still have some time, I guess. I'm just going to give you an understanding of what Veezoo is doing behind the scenes, because I'm sure that it's going to be the first question. So here's an example of a knowledge graph. This one is in German. Veezoo speaks German, English, French, and Italian. But I won't bother you with the German. So there's an example for insurance, right? So let's take the following example question. Which young clients own a BMW and don't have a legal protection policy? So the first thing that Veezoo does is tries to understand which concepts, which passages in your question are actually meaningful, like they mean something, right? There's not some stop word or anything. They actually contain some kind of meaning. So in this case, young clients, BMW, legal protection, and so on. So for each one of these, Veezoo will use the knowledge graph and to try to understand or to try to create possible ways on how it could be understood, right? So young could mean there's a customer segment, young and professionals, or it could also mean the age is below, certain threshold, or maybe you don't have age pre-computed. Could mean the years since the birth date below a certain threshold, or it could even mean, for instance, the clients with a specific product called Young 2.0. Clients, in your data warehouse, you could have a CRM partner. It could be the accounting client or the contract partner with some kind of weird, this looks like SAP nomenclature. So, and by the way, you should only care about active clients, right? So obviously, when I say clients, you don't want to get the ones that are not deactivated or deleted. And BMW, well, to own a BMW, what does this mean? Maybe the customer has an active policy for a vehicle whose model name contains the word BMW. Oh, and by the way, there's a field called is owner, which you need to set to true if you actually want the owner and not just, I don't know, maybe someone that has a policy for a car, but it's not his own. I don't know. So, and finally, legal protection. You don't have a legal protection policy. Well, check all active policies and make sure none is for legal protection, right? So all of this is then put together into multiple ways on how you can understand your question, right? So one possible way could be the user is actually interested in seeing clients that they're called young, or I don't know, or they segment young and professionals and have active legal policy. And we use then a machine learning model that gives these scores and these, the probability of this being the right way to understand the question, right? So in this case, it thinks this one has a 90% chance of being the correct one. And we take this, Veezoo takes this and transforms into this very beautiful SQL query. And you can see here all the vehicle manufacturer name. Here is BMW, all these different models. Is already set as true, not customer age is below 30, for instance, and not exists. And of course, with Studio, you can add more specific definitions, right? You can really say if you want to define what young is to be below 30 or something else, right? So yes, and and after it gets the answer, it chooses the most appropriate visualization for it. And in fact, if I quickly show you whenever you ask a question, maybe let's just take this one, 10 customers with most orders. If you click, you'll see some of these other options here, top 10 customers. So 10 customers with most orders, it considered as well the 10 customers with most profit, for instance, or the top 10 orders for each customer. These are all possible ways, but in this case, it's very confident that this is the correct one. So that's why it shows this one. Yes, so finalizing. Well, AXA is AXA Insurance is our biggest customer, and so they're using Veezoo for self-service, access to data. Data is accessible to all business users. We have over 2,000 users at AXA using Veezoo, and with definitions clearly available. We have a very high weekly active users. They actually increase their usage of analytics, especially with their one-to-one meetings. So the sales team, it's actually really the sales team and sales managers and even sales reps are using Veezoo, and they are discussing their KPIs and they're analyzing to see what are the possibilities. Which kind of customers could they contact? Maybe those that have birthday next week and don't have a certain policy that they are interested in selling currently, and seeing where they are lacking in their KPIs, which products they should be selling more, and so on. And they are asking thousands of questions every day, and it's quite interesting. I mean, when we started, we didn't know how many questions people would ask. We thought, we really thought people had a lot of questions. It turns out they have really a lot of questions, and they even have the possibility to save these questions as dashboards, but they keep asking questions. So that's really great, and it shows us a lot that like business usually underestimates the amount of questions their employees would ask. Sometimes people just get the people in the data team, they get some amount of questions in their emails from specific users that are highly curious, but they don't notice that there is a curiosity tax. So a lot of people have questions, but they're not asking, right? And with Veezoo, this really lowers the barrier, so you can really see that. So yeah, so if you're interested what we're doing and would like to try out, you can sign up now for free, veezoo.com/signup, and I'll be very happy to hear your experience, your feedback, and help us improve our product and see if we can help you as well, make your company more data driven. I also write to Substack. If you're interested, you can check out jpmonteiro.substack.com. I write some stuff every now and then there about data democratization, and but don't take it too seriously. And finally, yes, thank you very much. These are all my contacts, and if you want to write me an email, just reach out to jp@veezoo.com. Open for questions.
Thank you, JP. Just before we do go to the questions, if you don't mind, everyone just takes off mute. We'll give JP a quick round of applause. We do have a few questions. So I'll just
Oh,
quickly.
wow, that's quite a lot.
Imran seems very excited.
No, it's a very good product. I really like it.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting indeed. So if the source data changes, does it need to be uploaded each time? Is the first question, JP?
So if you're talking here about an Excel, right, then yes, there's really no way around. But if you're connecting to your data warehouse or SQL database, then you don't need to worry because we're accessing always your database directly. So every time you ask a question, it writes a SQL query that goes against your data. So you always have the latest data. Of course, sometimes if you, for instance, Veezoo needs to understand your question. So for that, it still needs to index certain keywords, right? So for, if you have a new product, maybe Veezoo will need to sync that, and that can be scheduled then to run. But this is, it doesn't copy your data, just index certain keywords that it needs to understand your question.
So I think you might have answered this during your talk as well, but so probably the second part of that question as well was, does the data need to be imported or can the service connect to an external source? I think you mentioned it connects, again, we'll use Excel as an example. It connects directly to that, doesn't it, rather than, having to import it or anything?
Exactly. So you don't need to, you can just give some credentials, create some read-only credentials, whitelist or IP, and you're ready to go.
That second question I'm going to leave to last because that's probably a good last question. The one I want to jump to is there a limit on the size of data that Veezoo can handle?
We only have a limit for the Excel. Just otherwise we don't want to just upload a limited amount to our database. But otherwise, you can. We're dealing here with tons of data, millions and millions of rows. With our major clients, so there's really it of course we leave the responsibility in the end for performance to your database. So we're writing efficient SQL queries, but in the end, if there's something you want to improve there on the performance, you can always tweak your data warehouse because it's always just writing SQL queries. Yep.
So from a Veezoo perspective, so obviously, to run those sort of data warehouse and that sort of stuff, there'll be a cost associated. That's probably separate from your app. But as far as Veezoo goes, is there a subscription kind of model or licensing model for that?
Yes. So we have a very transparent pricing. You can find. I can quickly share. I forgot actually to mention that for the question because we have now. Let me quickly share my screen. So you see it. If you go to Veezoo.com, you can always go to pricing. There's a monthly and yearly plan with a discount yearly, and we have a free version, and it's it's very recent. It's end of the December that we launched it. So for up to 5 users, you can ask as many questions as you want. You can only have one knowledge graph, right? So it's in the cloud. There's community support. You can enter our Slack channel, and you can give it a try, and you can just use it. And if you have more needs, right? If you have more people or you have more data sets that you would actually want to analyze, there's a standard, which is a very friendly plan for people, for smaller companies, and the professional, where you get premium support, you get way more features, and there's an enterprise as well for things like single sign-on and all these kinds of enterprising stuff. Would Veezoo bypass masked or encrypted fields? Well, you can always select which kind of columns you want to import, right? So you don't need to give Veezoo access to everything. I guess that answers the question.
Oh, okay, so you can. So I guess that comes on to what Zach Hussain just said as well. Does a system need to be initially set up, or does it automatically use some form of AI to understand and produce the outputs of data? Do we have to go in and select what we wanted to pick up manually, or does it?
Exactly. So if you remember the beginning of the presentation there, when I started with Veezoo, I selected which tables and which columns. I went to the test there. so you can select which tables and columns, and
Right,
you don't
okay.
need to train anything from scratch. You don't need to give it a bunch of examples. So it already comes with a pre-trained model that understands your questions.
No, I think it's a really good product. I think the only question that a lot of organizations would have is what I questioned in the beginning, is the location of where the data is stored. A lot of companies are nervous around data and where it's stored. Is it encrypted? While
Yes.
it's at rest? And
yes, exactly. So it's encrypted. We follow, the best practices there for keeping your data secure, and we try really to avoid as much as we can actually having any kind of data, because data is a liability in the end as well. I like this expression, data is the new oil, because it's not only something that is good when you have it, but if it leaks is a problem. So that's why we access your data directly, and we don't we try to minimize everything we can that it needs to know from your data, right? Yeah,
that's great. Now,
mm-hmm.
was there any more questions, Shrubaz?
Yeah. So just Imran, your second question, which was about the name. Where was it? Let me find it. Oh yeah. Does Veezoo have a meaning? How did you come up with that name? But I'll leave that till the last question, because it's more about your brand.
Actually, so the whole idea of Veezoo came also from a hackathon. So it was a hackathon project. So the name came in, I don't know, 5 minutes. And actually, the name comes from visualization, right? So actually, in Portuguese, Veezoo, in Brazilian Portuguese, Veezoo is if you see like a nice view or something, like you go to the beach in Rio and you see something beautiful, you say, "Oh, what a nice Veezoo." So that's the idea of actually the visual aspect. At the same time, so we're here in Switzerland, people speak German. A lot of people thought it was called Veezoo, which means why in German. So it turns out has this double meaning, right? So there's visualization and the why and the questions there, but that was not the intended. Yeah.
Very interesting.
I think someone's still typing, Shabazz. I've got one more question, JP. Do you know when you originally imported the source, the Excel file, what other options were there? I didn't catch the.
Which kind of connector?
What a number of, yeah.
So let me quickly.
JP, I've got a question for you as well on similar lines. Is there a limit on what data source you can connect to?
Yeah, let me quickly show you the connectors. So we're always expanding the number, like the different connectors that we have. Currently, we have here Amazon Redshift, BigQuery, XSOL, IBM DB2, SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle. But if you have, another database that is not there, just tell us and we can extend it. Yeah, and then if you come here, you have to fill up some stuff. We have SSH tunneling. If you need any questions, just join our Slack. Yes.
So
Yeah,
something like JP, something like hosted SQL in Azure, I'm assuming you can connect to that as well. As a data source.
Which one?
Like Microsoft SQL Server. So I'm assuming that's server running on pre-setting manager or a virtual machine. But hosted SQL in Azure. So
yes, exactly.
A PaaS solution. I'm assuming you can connect to that as a source as well.
Exactly, Azure SQL as well. Yes. So if it speaks SQL, maybe it's not even here. We can easily add it, so that shouldn't be any problem. And I think even Azure SQL, you could even already use the Microsoft SQL Server connector that we have, I believe. But if it doesn't, then it should be a very small thing. Just reach out to us and we can extend it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Zach's asked a question on do you have any control over where the data is stored for different companies? I know AWS has availability zone, a region in London. So can it connect to any region anywhere on the world?
Yes.
As long as it's cloud hosted.
Exactly. So if your data is doesn't matter where it is, we can set up the connection there, even also with SSH tunneling, as I mentioned. So yeah.
Excellent. A lot of questions there, JP, which obviously means
That's great.
people were quite engaged, I was very engaged as well. So thank you very, very much again for being our first guest presenter of 2022.
Yeah, thank you for the honor of
Thank you.
the invitation.
Very
You know,
much
I can't forget that name now. You've chosen a really good name.
Veezoo. I like the meaning behind it. I like that story. That's a cracking story. Really good story.
Cool.
When we find ourselves in Brazil, we see a good view. I know what to say.
exactly.
Say it with a German accent, yeah.
I'll say it in my Yorkshire accent. Excellent. Thank you very much, JP. Don't think we have any more questions, so well, I think that's it for Bradford Cloud User Group this month. Yeah, definitely thank you again. We'll always keep an eye out on our Twitter page. We'll send out details. We're just currently talking to a few people about presenting next month. So yeah, please keep an eye on our Twitter. Please go follow JP. JP, do you want to just put your Twitter and your LinkedIn stuff? Do you want to put something just quickly in the chat?
Yes.
People know how to follow you.
So
It's all right, Dean. I had you covered. I asked the licensing question.
No worries, mate. Yeah, teamwork.
Quality assurance.
So yeah, these are all my contacts.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. We'll put those up on our Twitter as well. Bradford JP, so people can get in touch with you. So yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you very much, JP. And until next time, we'll see you all later.
Thank you.
Thank you, JP.